Hi, everybody. I'm just gonna wait for more people to connect to audio. Welcome to the How to Grow Your Hub training. I'm super excited to get started. Thank you all for your patience. We had some Zoom troubles trying to get the link, but we have it started, and I'm happy to see all of your faces. We are gonna get started probably just about now. Maybe folks will hopefully trickle in if they think to try adding the link again. But thank you so much for joining. We are going to get started. So let's start with some just like intros. If you could drop your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from in the chat, and then also maybe what did you have for dinner or lunch, whatever your most recent meal was, or what are you going to have? So and well, though you pop your intros into the chat, we can do our intros. My name is Koya. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a co-facilitator, and I had some tacos for dinner. I'll pass to Indigo.
Hey y'all, I'm Indigo. I use he, they pronouns. I'm on tech for today, and I kind of had a wacky dinner, but yeah, it's a long story. I'll pass to Ella.
Hi everyone, my name is Ella. I use she, her pronouns, and I honestly haven't had dinner yet. I'm gonna have it after this training today. I'll pass it back to Kolya.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, seeing some tacos too. Oh my God, I'm seeing more tacos. This is incredible. Look at us go. Fantastic. We're gonna get into it. In this training, we're gonna learn all about how we can grow our hub and make it better and have lots of people engaging with it. And I'm really excited. Thank you for spending your Thursday night with us. We really enjoy having you all here. And as we get into the training, I just want to say that I know that Zoom distractions can be a big barrier sometimes for learning. You know what you need to do in order to be focused and centered well in this call. I invite you to take those steps now. There are some suggestions there on the slide. I also encourage you throughout the training to do what you need to be present and comfortable in this space, whether that's getting up to go get a snack, taking a little break once in a while, anything you need. If you have any access needs that aren't being met on this call, send me or my co-trainer Ella a DM, a direct message, and we will take a second to figure out how to get your access needs met. Okay. We have been doing so much online lately that it can sometimes feel difficult to remember that we are still in our physical bodies in physical space. And as part of that, it's important to recognize and remember the physical space we're in. And we're going to open this training with a land acknowledgement. So I am on Massachusetts and Wampanoag lands in what is now known as Massachusetts near Boston. And there's a really incredible organization called the United American Indians of New England, which is this fantastic organization that puts on the National Day of Mourning every year in November, which brings people from across the country. And they have this campaign called the Massachusetts Indigenous Agenda. And it shows some things that they're like really focused on fighting for so that they can resist and survive and fight for sovereignty. So it includes things like education funding and honoring Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm going to drop it in the chat because I think it's really worth looking at no matter what state you're in. But I say all of this just to say that I think it's really important as Sunrise Hubs and members that we look to see whose land we are on, whose land are we occupying, and do our best to go and ask how we can help the Indigenous people and tribes and organizations in our area. Because I know that lots of tribes have things like this agenda that you can fight for. You can do phone banks and try to get people to call your representatives to support these kind of things. You can get out there and in town meetings and saying, this is why we need to have an Indigenous Peoples Day, right? So just think about all the opportunities for solidarity that you have based on your land. And anyone who is on this land who is not Indigenous to this land, please drop it in the chat, whose land you're occupying. If you don't know, I'll invite you to find out using a link that we're about to drop in the chat. Thank you. And if you are Indigenous to your land, thank you very much for being here. And let's fight for justice and sovereignty together. Okay, let's move on to our agenda. We are going to start with, as we're doing right now, our welcome intro. We are going to talk about recruitment, bringing people into our hub, retention, making sure we keep the people that we brought into our hub. And then we're going to talk about 2 key strategies or tools for those things, which are welcome meetings and one-on-ones. And then we're going to move into our closing. But before we really get into it, I want to ask, what brought you to this training? What is going on in your hub that made you want to learn strategies for how to grow it? We're going to do this as a full discussion, so feel free to just come off mute and share. You can like raise your hand on Zoom, or you can just drop it in the chat. But what brought you to this training? What's going on in your hub that made you want to learn strategies to grow it? And so I definitely like hear about, oh, I see, want to start a club on my school and learn how to. Totally, right? Like we're starting something new and you need to bring people in. And then new on the last college campus, had trouble recruiting during COVID. I definitely resonate with my hub too. We've really had trouble bringing people in with COVID. So these are some strategies we're going to talk about that you can use with COVID too and virtually. We know that bringing people into your hub, keeping them here and building strong teams is all really hard. And every hub is trying to do it. So I'm glad to tell you, you are in the right place. At this training, we're all here to support each other, to figure this out together. We're going to start by introducing you to a couple of key strategies that you can use to start growing your hub. We've only got an hour and a half, so we're not going to cover everything and solve everything, but I hope you can leave this training with a couple good tools in your belt to get you started. And with that said, I'm going to pass it right on over to Ella to talk about recruitment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So excited for it tonight. And to start off the training, we got to start where how you grow your hub, right? Like recruiting people and getting the numbers past the original 3 people that you sign up with. So I guess to start like this section, why did you join Sunrise? How were you recruited? You can go ahead and drop it in the chat. I know for me that I saw an Instagram story one day of some training that was happening, and I just decided to hop on. A friend recommended it to me. Yeah. I joined through a friend and decided to start my own hub at my school. That's awesome. Saw a post on social media. Yeah. These are all great and like gets us into like a couple of the different ways that people start coming into Sunrise. Oh, Ellery says, I was concerned about climate change. My mom handed me a book and I found about Sunrise there. That's sick. My friend told me she was starting a hub and wanting to help. Yeah. So we name a few different ways, right? And we'll talk about those ways. But the first thing I want to start with is when people get recruited because they see a Sunrise action, which often like happens on social media, right? And they get really excited and they join because of that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the Act, Recruit, Train cycle. Has anybody already heard of that cycle? Maybe like you heard the term once, maybe you're like an expert on it. And we're just gonna go over it a little quickly here, but the cycle is something that we talk about in Sunrise like a decent amount, right? Because it's one way that we think, oh, like how are we actually going to bring new people into the movement? What is going to incentivize people? And the basic steps of the cycle are this. So like the first thing is that we put on an action. So like the wide awakes last summer, maybe it's a sit-in at a congressperson's office, maybe it's a banner drop. It can be anything kind of like that. And then in the public, like people, like maybe they didn't know about Sunrise, but maybe they kind of cared about climate change, or they were just like hearing different things about social justice and wanted to get involved some way. But those people get excited and connect with something that we're fighting for. Maybe it's a specific bill, maybe it's intersectionality, maybe it's something like that, and they get excited and they join us. And once those people are excited, it's like our job to recruit them at that point and to really bring them in meaningful ways. So one simple way that you can do this is including a sign-up link to join your hub, or an invitation to come to your next meeting, along with like any of the photos or videos you post of your action online, because people will see those images, they'll be super pumped by them, and they might decide to sign up. Right. And then so people see that on Instagram, they're like, I want to try this out. I don't know where to start, but I'm going to show up to a meeting. Right. So they show up, and the final stage of the cycle, right, the train part, is you like bringing them deeper on what Sunrise is, what Sunrise can be like also for them, what we're fighting for, and like the important local work that your hub is doing, because local work is a really important, strong part of Sunrise. And then they're getting that information, and like maybe they're connecting with certain things. So you have to make sure to like invite them in a little bit more, right? Like giving them a role in your hub is super important, and showing them how to do that role is also super important, so that people don't feel lost. And a role doesn't have to be like something super big. It's not like the only roles that exist in hubs are like hub coordinators, but a role can even be helping with an art build the next weekend if you hear that they're really interested in art. And with this like invitation, the dream version of the cycle is, so we talked about each step, but right, so when people are recruited in that one cycle, they help plan an action that starts the next one, and then the cycle just continues. And this is one way that hub growth can happen, right? Like we're taking action, people see the action, they become hopeful or excited, they show up to the next hub meeting, and they're like basically recruiting themselves at that point, right? And they get trained, and then they're ready to take action, and the cycle continues. And, you know, that sounds really great, but it just isn't the reality of what always happens within Sunrise, right? Because like putting on actions and counting on people to see them and decide to join, like can't be our only recruitment method. The first thing is like, it may not always work that well, right? This strategy of like holding actions and counting on people to see them and like get like excited enough to be like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I want to be at a meeting, like can only works well generally in big left-leaning cities, and it doesn't always work the same in more rural or red-leaning areas. And for like the second reason, that strategy does work in some ways, but it has a lot of problems, right? Because if we count on people to only recruit themselves, we're going to have a base made up of people who happen to hear about our actions, right? So drop a plus sign in the chat if your hub has realized that it's disproportionately filled with people who share some identities, because your hub's actions tend to get noticed by people from the same kind of networks. That can, so like for my hub, what that looks like is a lot of high schoolers who were planning on going out of state for college got really motivated during 1 year to be involved in local climate orgs down here. But then like college happened, and the hub started breaking up and fragmenting, and as a result there's like not a lot of people, and it's just also like not representative of our community as a whole. Does anyone want to drop pluses in the chat if you've noticed that in your hub? If you haven't, that's also fine. I see Ernest has pluses, Indigo has pluses, Juliet has pluses. Yeah, seeing a lot of pluses. Yeah. So basically, in order to like remedy that, or not to remedy that, but in order to grow, if you rely on people to recruit themselves after your action, you're going to grow in certain ways, but you'll grow in ways that reproduce existing patterns of segregation and power imbalance. So for the recruit part of the cycle, in order to like remedy this part, you have to make plans, right? You have to go out, you have to talk to people, you have to talk to people that maybe they're not your friends, right? Maybe it's not your typical social circles, and you have to actively recruit them. And this is the other way to grow. So with that, there's a lot of ways, like how are we going to reach outside our typical social circles and talk to new people, right? So what are some proactive recruitment tactics that allow you to meet people where they are, right? People who maybe they wouldn't otherwise hear about your action. And if anyone has any ideas on tactics, maybe your hub use them, maybe another group use them, maybe you're like, maybe this would hypothetically work. And I'll redrop the question in the chat for y'all so we can generate a list together. Social media outreach, yeah. Train hub members how to one-on-one well. Yeah, that's really important. Canvassing in high traffic areas. Ellery said I can make announcements on the school announcement system. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Heather said whenever anyone from school posts something vaguely about climate, I try to recruit them. Yeah, that's really good. And then I think another couple of things that we can think about for trying to recruit people outside of our typical circles, right? Is going door to door, honestly. Or like maybe there's a community event, maybe there's a farmer's market and you decide to set up a table there. And there can also, we mentioned, some people in the chat are mentioning like stuff at like schools, which is super important. So you can give talks at schools and maybe even workplaces and community centers in order to try to reach more people. Ellery also added, you can talk to people in homeroom. Yeah. So step one of growing your hub is recruiting. We've talked about like the two big ways to recruit, right? So first we talked about the cycle thing where first we hold action so that people in the public can see what Sunrise is fighting for. And we create opportunities for people to get excited to join, like sign up links, invitations to hub meetings. And the second thing is we go out and we directly talk to people. We talk to them about what we're fighting for. We ask them to join. And like within that, there's like a ton of options to choose from, whether it's canvassing, whether it's like a talk at school, whether it's setting up a table at like your local farmer's market or something like that. So now we're going to go out into breakouts for a second to talk about how you might want to use these methods in your hub. Or maybe you've tried some of this stuff and just like hasn't worked. And that's also super important to talk about. So the questions for the breakout, we'll drop them in the chat so you don't have to memorize them. Is the first one is, what recruitment methods have you tried before? What's worked and what hasn't? And then the second is, what methods that we just talked about do you want to try? And like, how do you think you'll go about doing it? So I'll drop those in the chat. We're going to go into breakout rooms with like 2 or like 3 people, and we'll be in these for like 4 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. How did your breakout rooms go? Were there any common methods that you all talked about? Any common struggles? I know that in my breakout room, we talked about the struggles of being in a hub that's like mostly students, and summer and COVID has made that like super hard for recruiting new people. But does anyone else want to share? You can turn off your mic and turn on your mic and share with the group if you're feeling up for it. Ellery? Yeah, definitely agree. Building strong partnerships and figuring out like how are you going to distribute members between things is like really hard. So yeah, totally. Does one more person want to share? You can also type it in the chat if you feel more comfortable with that. Awesome. I'm super glad to hear that and excited for whoever is working on that. I know like it's really tough and it feels like a lot of people on this call are like in high school or college hubs, which I think is super cool. And I've also heard from different people about red states, but with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kolya to take us through the next step of bringing people in our hub.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ella. So we just talked a little bit about some strategies for getting people in the door, right? And interested in Sunrise. But just because someone shows up to one hub meeting doesn't mean they're gonna stay and come back. I'm wonder, drop a star if you've ever had this experience. So listen up. One day, a new person or maybe even a bunch of new people show up to your hub. Maybe it was after an action you held that got some attention, or the start of a school year when people are all joining new clubs, or any other reason. So you have all these new people, you're super excited about this energy, but then a couple weeks later, a lot of these new people are gone, and you're back to kind of just the same folks that you've had the whole time who's been there. So drop a star if, okay, I'm seeing some stars. I can definitely say in my hub, this has happened as being part of a school hub. We get a bunch in the beginning of the year, and then people are like, yeah, you know, I'm not sure this is for me. So yeah, super, super relate, star, 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 absolutely. That's okay. It's a common experience. Happens to me. But it does show that the job of recruitment and growing your hub isn't done after people show up. You have to make them want to stay. And I'm sure the welcoming team folks here are well versed in this kind of stuff. So let's now talk about how to do that, how to make your hub feel like a community that people want to be a part of and lead. Okay, so we have a slide to bring up where we are gonna start brainstorming. Thank you. Once people show up to a group, what makes them want to stay? So think about like a group you've been at. It could be a sports team, could be a volunteer team, could be any like group that you've been in. That what made you want to stay there? Drop it in the chat, come off mute. They have fun. Absolutely. Having fun is like rule number one. I love it. What else do you think? They have a say in what they have to do. Agency. Absolutely. Frequent and open conversation and connection. Yep. Purpose. Absolutely, Juliet. That is clutch. Yes, occasional relaxed and fun activities. Y'all are hitting all of the things we're talking about. You can keep dropping them in the chat if you want. On the next slide, we can see that you guys have hit pretty much everything we had that we were thinking about. The three main elements that we want to think about. Connection with others. Exactly, Ernest. Oh my God, you got it. 2, opportunity to do meaningful work at varying levels of time commitment and with recognition and appreciation, right? So purpose, exactly. And an opportunity to grow, right? An opportunity to change and try new things and take on leadership positions and don't feel like you're being stagnant, right? So these are our 3 main things. I'm going to drop them in the chat too so we can remember them. We are about to go into breakouts to talk about, well, first of all, we're going to journal, then we're going to go breakouts. The questions are, how do you think your hub is doing at cultivating these 3 main things that make people want to stay? What is strong? What are you good at doing? What maybe could you work on and improve? And then you're going to pick one of those elements, then think, what could you do to make people in your hub feel it more? So you could think opportunity to grow. How could I make that more of a thing? Oh, maybe if I had more like a list of leadership opportunities that I was able to send out to folks, right? So what we're going to do is first, we're going to spend 2 minutes thinking and journaling about these questions. And then we're going to go into breakouts and share out our thoughts. So, and at 8:40, like 3 or 4 Eastern Standard Time. So just take 2 or so minutes to journal about these questions. Fantastic. I hope that your breakouts went super duper well. I know mine was super awesome. We talked a lot about maybe starting a new hub and what kind of, and using one-on-ones to really like boost our hub and interaction. I would love for a person or two to share. What are some ideas you had? You can drop it in the chat or come off mute. Fantastic. I love these ideas. I definitely encourage you to keep brainstorming your own thoughts on what you can do to establish these key three things of connection, of growth, of purpose, so that people want to stay in your hub. There's so many different really cool ways to do it. And next, we are going to share 2 specific tools we recommend for you to try out. First, we are going to take a quick 5-minute break. So come back here at 8:56 Eastern, or just in 5 minutes from wherever, 56. And we will see you then. So see you in 5 minutes.
That'd be really great. Oh, recording is in progress now. Yeah, back. Oh, it seems like a decent amount of people are back, so we're gonna jump right back into it. So now we're gonna dig into the 2 tools that we mentioned in the agenda at the start: welcome calls and then one-on-ones. So the first tool is the welcome meeting. So we've talked about that moment where maybe you had like a cool action, or maybe you're doing like a bunch of canvassing, you set up a table at a local community event, something like that. And you're having like a bunch of new people, or maybe like a couple new people showing up to your hub, and they're all kind of showing up at once, right? And at that point, it's a really good idea to hold a special welcome meeting for them. If you're like, I don't know when to schedule a welcome meeting, that's totally fine. I think generally a good rule of thumb is you can schedule welcome meetings after every action you hold, after every big recruitment push that you do, right? Like after you go canvassing or something, but like obviously holding actions consistently and doing that like doesn't work for all hubs. Like that doesn't work for some to be doing actions like once a month or stuff like that. So more generally, I think a good rule for it is like maybe once a month or once every few months, which you can just use as a space to welcome anyone who's new to the hub, or maybe just wants to learn more about the hub, right? Like maybe they've been around, but they haven't met new people in a bit. And it's really important to note that like a welcome meeting isn't just an informational meeting. It's also not like a regular hub meeting. I think it's like much more fun, right? And we have a welcome meeting format that we recommend, and it's designed to include all of those elements that we talked about that make people want to stay in a group, right? Like connection, meaningful opportunities, stuff like that. So it includes a lot of the good stuff. So for example, it includes opportunities for connections with other new members and returning members. So like maybe it's like relational breakouts. The second thing is it can include testimonials from someone who's a new person who can like relate to the audience, right? Like someone who's enthusiastic already about like being involved, maybe at like a lower time commitment, but they're not a central leader just yet, because it's really important to highlight those people, because again, hubs are more than hub coordinators. The third is that you can offer a chance to do some kind of meaningful work with the group, right? Like maybe for part of the call, you're doing phone banking or something like that. And then the fourth thing is you can offer really basic information about what the group is, like how often do you meet? Do you have any upcoming actions? Is there any sort of community norms that your hub has? Stuff like that. And I'm not going to go deeper into the details of hosting a welcome meeting now, but we do have a toolkit for hosting a welcome meeting that we'll share at the end of the training. It'll also be included in the email you receive after this training. And it includes some planning instructions, and it even includes like a template agenda to use, which is super helpful. But I'm going to pass it back to Kolya to get us into the second tool.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okie dokie. So our second tool is one of my favorite things in organizing. If you talk to anyone who organizes or does activism, they will tell you the one-on-one is king. And I wonder, has anyone here heard of a one-on-one? We've been talking about it. I know that some people have brought it up. So does anyone feel like you can define what a one-on-one is? Feel free to raise your Zoom hand or just come off mute. Absolutely, that's a great example of a one-on-one. And also a great example of like showing how you can introduce somebody to the hub and make sure they feel situated, and that will increase their likelihood of staying. So as you said, a one-on-one is basically just a conversation with some specific goals, which will be on this next slide. So remember that we had those three key principles earlier that make people want to join and stay in groups. The three key principles of connection, of purpose, and of growth, of the possibility for growth. Well, in a one-on-one, your overall goal is to offer those things to the person you're talking to. Connection, that growth, and that purpose, right? And the goals on this slide are just set up to help you do that. Connection is pretty simple. It's just you're talking to the other person. You're finding out more about them, why they're interested in Sunrise, what they're interested in doing in Sunrise, finding shared values, things that you both care about and can talk about. And that builds that connection, right? And then you can offer the second two things, the opportunity to do meaningful work, that purpose, and to grow. You want to find out what they care about. And then based on that, you can figure out how the things that they care about are connected to what our movement is fighting for, right? So as you find out, okay, this person really cares about clean water because in their life, they've had experiences where they've had like polluted water and it's hurt their health and their family's health, right? And here at Sunrise, this hub, we really care about clean water. Part of the climate crisis and the Green New Deal is fighting for clean water, right? And like throwing down for line 3 because we know water is life, right? So that lets you connect the work you're doing in the hub to what is meaningful to them. And then you can invite them to get more involved in your hub in a way that's genuinely tailored to that person, what they care about and what they're interested in, right? And that gives them an opportunity to grow and to do meaningful work. So all that said, when it's possible, we recommend trying to have a one-on-one with every new person who shows interest in your hub. If you're in a small hub that's just getting started, that might be doable. If you're in a bigger hub that has a lot of people showing up after actions, that might be really challenging. Where you might have to prioritize who to give one-on-ones to, who you might need to talk to more. Maybe you have to reach out and be like, we have so many people who are interested. We're going to have to talk to you a little bit later just for capacity, but please come to meetings, right? Or just like have a welcome meeting that kind of could be like a group one-on-one in some ways with a lot of breakouts. But either way, when you one-on-one someone, you're making it way more likely that they will take the next step and get more involved with your hub. And they're not just for new hub members. It's also good practice to have follow-up one-on-ones, and maintenance is one way I've heard it called, with folks who have been in your hub for a while. So you can stay connected with them, hear how they're feeling about the hub, the work they've been doing, and maybe even see if they're interested in taking on a new role or more leadership, right? So like following up with people. And also just building that connection, which is always lovely. I love one-on-oneing some of my like people who I'm close to in my hub. Okay, all of that said, all of that idea and theory of a one-on-one, let's model what it could look like. This is going to be different than the way that like normal one-on-ones go. Usually they're 20 to 30 minutes. I've had one-on-ones that have taken 45 minutes, an hour, right? But this is going to be super short and condensed for this training. It's just going to be about 5 minutes. In fact, I'm going to like set a timer and be watching it. I am going to be one-on-oneing Ella. Pay attention to what you notice me doing, and we'll debrief it afterwards. So are you ready, Ella?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. Okay. Hey Ella, how are you doing? It's good to talk to you.
I'm good. I finally got to refill my water bottle, so like feeling better.
Yes, hydration is so important. I'm just here to talk to you to find out a little bit more about you, maybe why you're interested in Sunrise, and then also like some ways you could plug in too. So I wonder like what brought you to Sunrise? Like what made you interested in Sunrise?
Yeah, so I think for me, I struggled for a really long time with finding an environmental group that I wanted to stick with because a lot of them are like polar bears or like straws, and like I'm just like not really into that stuff. But like my community living in South Florida, I know that the hurricane season just like gets longer because we stay at home longer, schools close down for like a long period of time. And I just graduated high school, but my high school was a public school, like 5,000 kids, so it caused like a major stoppage, and just like the community as a whole like just was hurt by it.
Totally, totally. And I wonder, like, did you feel like you had an ability to do anything about that? Like, did you feel like you had somewhere you could do something in response to it?
Honestly, for a really long time, no, but I think that's just because I was taught like environmentalism was like Animal Planet or something like that, and not something that I could really interact with.
Absolutely. What do you think a more like what do you think it should be like if it shouldn't just be polar bears? What should it be like?
Yeah, so I think that environmentalism really needs to be intersectional and center on frontline communities. So, like my community, I'm in South Florida, and it's also a majority Latina community. So I know from like going to the farmers market with my abuela that she'd always bring like different bags to kind of buy things instead of buying new bags. And I was like, I don't really understand, like, why is this environmentalism? What do you mean? But like slowly I started to understand it more and just like see it as like everyday life, not like Animal Planet.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I really resonate with this idea of like feeling like the people are kind of getting ignored and like we're just focusing on these like not focusing on people, which also means that we kind of like ignore inequities, right? When we're not talking about people, we're not talking about environmental racism and other really important issues. So I really resonate with that. I wonder what so it sounds like you're really interested in like focusing on like your community and trying to inspire action there. Have you had any experience doing like climate activism or any idea what you might want to focus on?
Yeah, so I think, okay, couple notes about South Florida is that I feel like a lot of environmental organizations talk about it as like the poster child of the climate crisis, but then organizations don't delve deeply into it. So, like, my hub is working on creating a statewide network, but I also have to move away soon. But within Sunrise, a lot of my work is with Somos Sunrise, which is the Latina constituency. And we've like been doing trainings in frontline communities recently.
Yeah, that's super duper cool. Well, I'm really excited about like doing trainings and I bet you'd be really good at it. I mean, just hypothetically seem like you'd be really good at doing trainings. So it would be really cool if you could come be a co-trainer on this new training I'm running next week on how to grow your hub. Would that sound like something you're interested in?
Yeah, totally. Just give me a time and I'll be there.
Yay, amazing. Thanks for being one-on-one, Ella. That was awesome. Um, we had a chance to kind of wrap it in a nice, neat little bow. But that's not always how one-on-ones will go, and hopefully it'll take longer than 5 minutes. But I wonder, what did you notice happen during that conversation? What were some things that I might have been doing? Yeah, definitely. I was trying to see if we could find the shared values, right? Like things that we connect on and might agree on that could be things we work on the hub together. And it doesn't mean you necessarily have to resonate with everything in that you might not like have the same experience, but you can definitely work and ask more questions and find out to see where people might overlap. What else did any people notice? Yeah, and feel free to keep dropping in the chat. That's definitely a good one. One tip that I hear all the time with one-on-ones is that you, as a one-on-oneer, like for me in this scenario, should be talking like 20% of the time, um, instead of and not too much more, right? That the like Ella or the person I'm one-on-oneing should be talking like 80% of it, right? And I think that can definitely change based on your conversation. I think that like a 50-50 conversation is really what you should be aiming for eventually, because you want to see each other equally. But I think that definitely as you get to know people, like an 80-20 can definitely be a really good tip to make sure. I don't know if you noticed, but I tried when I ask a question, I ask my question and then I take a sip of water so I don't keep talking and rambling and like just let them answer the question. I've found as a really good tip for me. Okie dokie. Um, with that said, we are going to do a little practicing now. You guys are all going to do a short one-on-one with another person. So make a connection. Try to genuinely learn about them, what they care about, what brings them to Sunrise or this training, and ways you can connect with each other. If you end up discovering a way you can work together, cool, ask the other person about it. But this is just a random person who's probably not in your hub, so you might not have any ask for them, and that's totally okay. But just try to make a connection, find out why they came to Sunrise, why they're in this training, all of that fun stuff. We are going to go into pair breakouts for about 10 minutes. And you are each going to have 5 minutes to one-on-one the other person. So that means make sure at 9:20 that you switch. So at whatever time that is for you, the 20, but in 5 minutes. So let's jump into those breakouts.
Awesome, Ernie. Great. So with that, I just want to offer like a final piece of guidance on one-on-ones, because like as we brought up earlier, one-on-ones like often end in an ask, and an ask can look like a lot of things, because what your ask is, like what you're asking the person to do, what you're asking a person to come to should really depend on a lot of the responses and stuff that you're getting, right? So like in the one-on-one I had with Kolya, I mentioned how I really like training. So they were like, hey, I have this training opportunity, da 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 da. But like, say I wasn't a person who like really felt comfortable with trainings. Like maybe the ask would have just been to come to a meeting or something like that. So adjusting based on what the person says is really important. But it's also important to note, like, one-on-ones aren't just for asks. They're also for bringing like people in and getting to know people and building like connection. And and another important thing to note about like making asks is like if you hear the person is super busy, you could let them know about ways to get involved that are small and flexible, whether it's like coming to the meeting and being a note taker or just reposting something on Instagram, right? And when you make the ask, you do have to ensure like the person fully understands what you're asking, what they're committing to, right? Like if it's on a specific day at a specific time, tell them. If it requires like a certain level of preparation, so like for a training, there's like run through calls before a training happens, tell them about that. And the person who you're one-on-oneing should also feel like comfortable with saying yes or no, and know that like you're going to respect their decision either way, because like we don't want to like push people a lot and be like, hey, I know you said no to this, but like I'm going to keep asking you the same question, because that feels like really uncomfortable and just like also not understanding, because like you have to meet people like where they're at and like what they want to do. And yeah, but I'm going to move us into our closing for this call. We're finishing up. It's 9:30, so if you have to hop off, totally hop off, but I'm just going to close really quick. And I hope like y'all are leaving feeling like maybe you have some new ideas and tools under your belt. Maybe you learned something about one-on-ones. Maybe you just got more experience with doing it, which is also super important. And as we close out, I'd love to hear from people, like, what are you taking away from this training? So what we'll do for that is I have a couple questions. I'll drop them in the chat so that people can share back in the chat, which is, what is one strategy for recruiting people or for helping them stay and go deeper into your hub that we talked about tonight that you're excited to try out in your hub? Or you can also answer the question, who is one person who you'd like to have a one-on-one with? And this doesn't have to be like a specific person's name. Maybe you want to like talk to some of the kids who are in your science class. Maybe you want to talk to one of the vendors at your local farmers market or something like that. Welcome meetings, yeah, really good tool for recruiting. Does anyone else want to share in the chat? One-on-ones, yeah, super important. Those were the main two tools, so totally understand if other people are like, yeah, I agree. Assigning different roles and teamwork in order to make everyone feel included, yeah, that's really important, and it'll make your work like a lot more meaningful for the hub as a whole when it's like super inclusive and super collaborative. And we're gonna close out. If you have any questions about like anything we talked about, you can feel free to stay on. The trainers are gonna stay on for like 5-10 extra minutes to chat, answer any questions. And for everyone in general, right, we're going to send out a follow-up email after this that includes like the slides, it'll include the recording, and it'll include those resources we mentioned earlier, like how to host a welcome meeting and stuff like that. So good luck with growing your hubs. I'm really excited, and also excited that a lot of the hubs in this call are high school hubs. That's super, super exciting. So have a good night, everyone. It was really nice being with you all tonight.